Cormani McClain spurns the Gators. Billy Napier whiffs in a big way with his biggest recruit thus far. Next on Read and Reaction, the articles. Hey, everybody. Will Miles here with Read and Reaction. I wish I had better news to bring to you tonight, but obviously the surprise of the evening, Cormani McClain spurns the Gators, decides to go and become a Miami Hurricane, shocking everyone. And really, you saw it on Twitter if you were following along at all, that the recruitniks, the people who follow that sort of stuff, the people who charge for access to the inside information were very, very surprised at this decision. We're not going to talk tonight in this article specifically about why McClain chose Miami. What we're going to talk about is the implications of McClain choosing Miami, but certainly a surprise and certainly bad news. But hey, we're going to analyze things regardless of what direction it goes, give you an idea of where the program is, and hopefully help you understand what this means in the grand scheme of things for Florida and the Florida program. So, hey, if you like what we do here, if you're enjoying the articles over at Read and Reaction, this is the most read month we've had over at Read and Reaction since the site started. So thank you so much for that. We're doing a couple of new things over at the Patreon site. So just about every Wednesday, sometimes it's on Thursday, I'm putting up sort of a 5 things, the things I think about the program, little quick hits, a little bit of extra stuff that maybe hit the cutting room floor for different articles that I've been writing and don't have time to pull it out into a full article, but sharing that over there. And then also right after the games every Saturday, I'm doing a live YouTube stream over on Patreon. Send out the link. You can check that out. Participate. Talk to me. I'll answer your questions while you're on there, all that sort of stuff. Go over there. It's as little as $2 a month. You can follow along over there. Certainly appreciate your support over there. Appreciate your support reading the site. Appreciate your support here on YouTube as well. So with that, we'll get to the article. Cormani McClain spurns the Gators. Even if Billy Napier's Gator team loses by 50 this weekend against Georgia on Saturday, that won't be a worse loss than when Cormani McClain shocked Napier and the entire recruiting industry by committing to the Miami Hurricanes. As someone who absolutely hates Georgia, I don't say that lightly. But a loss to the Bulldogs is a one-time event that says very little about long-term sustained excellence. Missing out on a player of McClain's ilk is all about grasping and coming up short of long-term sustained excellence. I wrote earlier this week about the first-year struggles of both Nick Saban and Kirby Smart before they built their dynasties. Saban went 7-6 in year one, while Smart went 8-5. But one of the key things I found when looking at those seasons was that Saban went 4-6 in one-score games, while Smart went 6-3. Both of them combined for 2 blowout 20-plus point wins in those seasons. That completely flipped in year 2 for both of them, with the 2 teams combining for 17 blowout wins. What changed? Jake Fromm and Julio Jones. Obviously, those players weren't the only guys making a difference on those teams, but Jones came in and caught 58 balls as a true freshman in 2008. Fromm came in for an injured Jacob Eason and threw for more than 2,600 yards and 9.0 yards per attempt. They were both important parts of each coach's bump class. What is a bump class? Bill Sykes familiarized me with the term bump class years ago. Bill's explanation is a great one, which is that since recruiting is based on relationships, it's hard to really recruit truly elite players when you're behind the 8 ball right after you're hired. But in the second recruiting class, you have plenty of time to build relationships and an extra added advantage. There isn't anything your opponents can say about you that they can actually prove. If someone wants to say Billy Napier can't win in the SEC, go ahead. There isn't any evidence of that. If they want to say he's not going to be able to build Florida into a power again, they're free to do so. But again, they're projecting just like any recruit is going to be. That means that Napier gets to sell his vision without any interference from wins and losses, at least as the relationship is starting. Additionally, I've looked at in-season performance and whether it correlates to recruiting quality, and I'm not convinced that recruits care all that much about what the product on the field looks like prior to arriving. Clearly, that's the case with McClain after Miami's ugly loss to Duke just last week. They're committing to a coach and his vision. And what that means is that a bump class is truly a measure of whether a coach is going to be able to recruit at an elite level. Saban had the third ranked class nationally for his bump class. So did Smart. I already mentioned names like Fromm and Jones, but those classes also included DeAndre Swift, Richard LeCount, Isaiah Wilson, Andrew Thomas, Mark Barron, Courtney Upshaw, Mark Ingram, Marcel Darius, Dante Hightower, and Terrence Cody. That is a boatload of talent. So that leads to the obvious question: what does missing on McClain mean, and where does Napier's bump class stand? Comps for Napier. Without McClain, Florida's 24/7 Sports point total stays at 270.92, but drops them to ninth nationally as the Hurricanes have jumped them in the overall rankings. It also keeps the Gators a solid fourth in the SEC, rather than nipping right at the heels of LSU for third. The Gators have an average player rating of 91.72. This is important because recruiting these days is really about tiers. Tier 1 right now consists of Georgia, average player rating of 93.28, Alabama, 94.10, and Ohio State, 93.33. Tier 2 consists of Notre Dame, 92.89, Oklahoma, 92.23, Texas, 92.26, LSU, 92.27, and now Miami, 92.49. Florida, 91.72, is in a third tier with Clemson, 91.73, Oregon, 90.85, Tennessee, 90.62, Penn State, 91.18, and USC, 91.06. Those programs aren't slouches, but being in the third tier of recruiting and fourth in the conference isn't good enough for the sustained excellence that Scott Strickland said he wanted when he let Dan Mullen go. I know that those differences in point totals don't sound all that significant, but they really are. Dan Mullen's recruiting classes were all pretty much between 90.1 and 90.7, or really tier 3, in his 4 years at Florida. And while Mullen fielded some good teams, he never fielded an elite one. If we compare Napier to former Florida coaches, we start to see the problem. I've written repeatedly about how players at the top of the rankings get drafted significantly more often. Because of that, I like dividing up recruits into Zone 1 players ranked 1 through 60, Zone 2 players ranked 61 through 200, and Zone 3 players ranked 201 to 600 instead of blue chips or 5, 4, and 3-star rankings. The result is that you can get an idea of how many players we should expect to be drafted from a given class. Since a team is made up of 22 players, you have an elite roster if you can average 5.5 draftable players per recruiting class. Urban Meyer's 2006 team had 4 Zone 1s, 13 Zone 2s, 3 Zone 3s, and 5.7 draftable players. Will Muschamp's 2012 class, 5 Zone 1, 4 Zone 2, 8 Zone 3, 4.7 draftable players. McElwain had 4 Zone 1 players, 2 Zone 2s, 9 Zone 3s, 3.9 draftable players. Mullen, 2019, 2 Zone 1s, 4 Zone 2s, 11 Zone 3s, 3.7 draftable players. And Napier has 0 Zone 1s, 9 Zone 2s, 11 Zone 3s for 3.9 draftable players. So Napier right now sits right where Mullen and McElwain were in their bump classes in terms of the number of people we should expect to be there. Napier's bump class just isn't that much better than either Mullen or McElwain. He has a ton of players in Zone 2 and 3, but 0 top-end talent. Even with McClain in the fold, that would have still been somewhat true, but the number 2 player in the country is a different kind of deal, and we'll discuss that in a minute. The result is that as currently constituted, this class sits right where Jim McElwain was in 2016 and just slightly in front of Dan Mullen in 2019 in terms of expected players drafted. Not exactly what we want to hear at this late stage of recruiting. To be certain, there are still players on Florida's board. Keon Keeley, 7th nationally. Desmond Ricks, 15th. James Smith, 16th. And Kwa Russaw, 30th, are possibilities, as is offensive tackle Samson Okunlola, 18th. But the only way Napier is matching what Meyer, Saban, or Smart did in their bump classes is by signing 4 of those 5. Considering that McClain was the sure thing, it's hard to have confidence that outcome is in the cards. I mentioned Smart and Saban, and here's how Napier's class stacks up to their bump classes along with that of Urban Meyer at Florida. Saban in 2008, 4 Zone 1s, 7 Zone 2s, 16 Zone 3s, 6.2 draftable players. Smart, 2017, 6 zone ones, 9 zone twos, 6 zone threes, 6.2 draftable players. Meyer, 4 zone 1, 13 zone 2, 3 zone 3, 5.7 draftable players. And again, Napier, I said this earlier, but I want to repeat it, 0 zone 1, 9 zone 2, 11 zone 3, so 3.9 draftable players. Again, we can see that Napier's way behind the pace. The hope was with McClain in the fold that he could sign 2 more of those players listed above and get close to Saban and Smart. But at this point, that's pretty much out the window. McClain can be truly special. Lost in all these rankings is the fact that players ranked as high as McClain almost always get drafted and become major impact players in college football. I group him together with players ranked 30th or 55th because I have to draw the line somewhere, and that's really where the likeliness of being drafted starts to level out. But that likeliness drops precipitously just going from the number 1 ranked player to the 15th ranked player. McClain is the 2nd ranked player in the entire country. Here are some recent players to occupy that prestigious slot. 2016, Dexter Lawrence from Clemson, the first-round draft pick, 17th overall. 2017, Najee Harris, Alabama, first-round draft pick, 24th overall. 2018, Justin Fields, Georgia and Ohio State, first-round draft pick, 11th overall. 2019, Kayvon Thibodeau, Oregon, first-round draft pick, 5th overall. 2020, Bryce Young, Alabama, Heisman Trophy winner. In fact, the last player ranked 2nd to not really work out, and that's not completely fair because he did end up being awarded freshman All-SEC and 2-time All-SEC second-team honors, was Martez Ivey from the 2015 class. So that's your absolute floor for McClain. Freshman All-SEC honors and a 2-time second-team All-SEC performer. You can keep going back further if you want. The story is the same. Myles Garrett, first overall pick. Jalen Smith, 2nd round, 34th overall due to injury. Mario Edwards, 2nd round, 35th overall. And Cyrus Kwanjo, 2nd round, 44th overall. So in the last 10 years, we've got 8 guys drafted, a Heisman Trophy, 8 guys drafted in the 1st and 2nd round, a Heisman Trophy winner, and a guy who was second-team All-SEC twice. If we just sub in another 5-star, the 18th ranked Okunlola, for example, there's a lot more variability. 2016, Jeffrey Simmons, Mississippi State, 1st round, 19th overall. 2017, Jacoby Stevens, LSU, 6th round, 224th overall. 2018, Adam Anderson, Georgia, 13.5 sacks, dismissed because of a rape charge. 2019, Brandon Smith, Penn State, 4th round, 120th overall pick. 2020, Jalen Carter, UGA. I think we can agree he's going to be a future NFL first-round pick. These are still really, really good players, but the variance in outcome that we see has already become much more significant than it was at the 2nd spot. McClain was essentially a player guaranteed to be drafted. To get to the same level of guarantee, Florida needs to sign both Okunlola and Russell. Takeaway. When David Waters asked Dan Mullen a recruiting question last year following the 34-7 shellacking from the Bulldogs, and Mullen responded with a non-answer, it was the beginning of the end for Mullen. That set the stage for the entrance of Billy Napier, who had to prove to the fan base that he both understands how important recruiting is and can execute on his plan to get Florida back to prominence. He clearly expressed an understanding at his press conference as he immediately called college football, quote, a talent acquisition business. But when signing day came last February and Napier missed on Harold Perkins, who, by the way, has 36 tackles and 2.5 sacks for LSU, Jacoby Matthews, and Trevante Citizen, it caused some worry. For sure, it didn't spell doom and gloom, but it meant that he had failed to answer the question that everyone knows will define his tenure here. Can he land the recruiting classes necessary to win big? McClain's decision to go to Miami leaves that a gaping open question. And in some ways, that's a generous assessment. There's no doubt that recruiting is better than it was under Dan Mullen, but Florida fans didn't want better than Dan Mullen. They wanted better than Kirby Smart. I'm not sure there's any way to sit here with a straight face and say that Napier has given us confidence that he's going to be able to get there at this point. McClain's commitment is a signal. He was the number 1 priority recruit for this staff ever since it arrived. He is from Lakeland. Getting him may not have answered the recruiting question completely, but missing on him just takes any air out of the balloon that Napier has been building as many very good recruits have picked Florida over the summer. The state of Florida was leaky when Napier arrived, surrendering elite players to Alabama, Georgia, Clemson, and Ohio State on a way too regular basis. McClain's decision to go elsewhere in Florida may mean that those leaks are starting to get sealed off, but the fact that they're being sealed by Mario Cristobal and not Napier is a big problem for the Gators. To be sure, the Gators have 10 players in the top 235 nationally who hail from the state of Florida, but none of the best 15 players and only 2 of the top 25 players in the state are coming to Gainesville. Conversely, 3 of the top 15 players and 5 of the top 25, with a 6th possible in Ruben Bain, are going to Miami. Folks, you're going to point to NIL. and rumored payments that may have enticed McClain to change his mind and pick the Hurricanes. But here's the thing. That doesn't really matter. NIL is here to stay, and Florida has to compete in that landscape. It isn't immoral for a player to maximize his earnings while going to college. That's going to reap the benefits of his labor. In fact, you could make the argument that the old way was much worse from a morality standpoint. And regardless, it's Napier's job to acquire talent within the rules that exist. This isn't Little League where everybody gets a participation trophy. You're getting $7 million a year and have a staff of approximately 35,000 people to ensure players like Cormani McClain come to Florida. Napier whiffed. There's no other way to spin this. I suspect there may still be an opportunity to flip McClain at some point along the way, but that's what it's going to take to have a successful bump class. Because just like Napier said, this is a talent acquisition business. So that's my article. I wanted to remind people we've got a November sweepstakes going on. My friend Dan reached out to me about having a little bit of fun the rest of the season. He's graciously donated a prize, which is a chance to win 2 tickets to a Gators home basketball game. You can pick any game other than Kentucky. And basically, you click on the link that's down in the show notes, and you can go over there and you can select what you think Florida's record is going to be the rest of the year, how many points they're going to score against Florida State, which team they're going to play the best defense against. And if you just give us your email, you can enter that for the chance to win 2 tickets to that. So go ahead and head over there and do that. Look, I think it's easy to be fatalistic. And most of the time I tell people that you don't want to gauge a class by one player. But this is somebody who Florida has felt like has been in the fold for a really, really long time. And those of us who've heard rumblings behind the scenes, and I don't want to pretend that I'm an insider like the way some other people are, but based on what we've seen on Twitter tonight about these guys who really are on the inside talking about what a shock this is, Florida's staff had this penciled in, and all the beat writers had this penciled in. And so adding another 1 or 2 more 5-stars was something that might be in the fold in order to take this bump class to where we could say, hey, this thing is starting to compare to something that is valuable and something that Billy Napier is going to be able to build on. The whiff on McClain just really, really puts a damper on that. I don't see a way to get more than 7th or 8th at best in the country, regardless of who comes in along with that. And look, I mean, if NIL really is the reason that McClain wound up going to Miami, the guys they're trying to replace him with aren't going to be that much cheaper. And so, if you got beat out because of money, well, you're going to have to pony up for those kinds of elite players. I had a guy on Twitter today ask, he just reached out. Let me see if I can find his handle real quick. At Gator Typical, reached out and asked about he sort of had a stream of consciousness on Twitter talking about that it seemed like Napier was trying to lower the variance of the recruiting class by signing guys in that 100 to 200 range. The idea being that those guys would be cheaper investments compared to maybe a top 5 or top 10 player. And I actually agree from the standpoint, if you had unlimited ability to sign players, you might be able to do that. But I think in order to get enough hits in the 100 to 200 space, essentially McClain is a guaranteed star who's going to go to the NFL. How many guys in the 100 to 200 range turn into a guaranteed star who's going to go to the NFL? There, you got to do the job of the evaluation, and you got to get a little bit lucky. Maybe Napier does get lucky. Maybe those guys turn out, but that is what it is. And look, I think most people who follow recruiting and follow recruiting closely know, or at least believe, that you need elite 5-star guys to win in college football. You need to be in the top 2 of your conference. You need to be bringing it. You need to get into that tier 2 range at least to be able to compete. Otherwise, it's a crapshoot. You need a quarterback who can absolutely carry you. You need to get everything to sort of cluster together right at the right time, like Auburn has a couple of times and been able to take down Alabama and get to the national championship back in 2010 with Cam Newton, and then with Jason Marshall being able to take them off later. You get Burrow come into LSU and all of a sudden they're able to plow through. But again, even that's a team that's been 3rd in the SEC in recruiting there that entire time, had a lot of talent. All those guys go to the NFL. They all leave. Look at what's happened to the LSU program. So look, I mean, Scott Strickland talked about wanting sustained excellence. Sustained excellence is going to require recruiting classes that have more talent than the Florida recruiting class is right now. That doesn't mean these aren't good players. That doesn't mean they're not going to contribute to Florida winning a bunch of ball games. But look, if 10-2 is your goal, this recruiting class is going to get you there. If 14-0 or 15-0 is your goal going through a playoff, this recruiting class isn't going to get you there until they extend that playoff out to 12 teams. And look, once that playoff is extended out to 12 teams, this analysis completely changes. But as of right now, when there's a 14 playoff and 3 or 4 of the teams in the SEC are recruiting at a higher level than you are, it's going to make it really, really hard to get there. So, look, depressing night. I wish I had better news. I woke up this morning and texted a couple of buddies that it, happy Cormani McClain day. I was confident that he was coming to Gainesville. I had an article that was basically already written, had to rewrite it for this. So hopefully you all appreciate that getting that out relatively quickly, because it did have to change the tone, did have to change the analysis. But look, I mean, I never want to gauge a recruiting class on one commit. But this is a huge, huge miss. And, there's just no other way to put it. So I'm going to be honest with you guys, regardless of what the situation is. And if I think somebody's doing a good job, I'm going to tell you. If I think they're doing a bad job, I'm going to tell you. And hopefully that's why you come here. And hopefully that's why you value what I have to say. So again, thank you for reading. Like I said, most reads we've had any month since the site started back in 2017 here in October. September was the 3rd highest month we've had. So a lot of engagement there on the website, a lot of engagement here on the YouTube channel as well, and certainly engagement over on Patreon. Again, I'd encourage you to go over there if you want to talk to me directly from the standpoint of, those post-game things where I can answer questions while while everything's fresh after a game. Head over there to patreon.com/readandreaction and give us a look. So thanks so much. Appreciate it. Go Gators.